Started. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. Today we're going to be talking about Grant Plus, which is a solution, a digital service tool for optimized applications. And we're going to be going through a case study today, specifically around review management, because we know this is kind of an integral part of the granting process. So we wanted to give a kind of a case study to everybody and cover over that. So basically, our agenda today is we'll do a brief intro. We'll give you kind of a description of what Grant Plus is. We'll go through that case study that I just mentioned. We'll kind of give you a high-level overview of the key features and benefits, and then we'll do a QA. So again, thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Manishin. I'm the Vice President of Client Services here at Eperformance. And I'm joined by Divya Ramachandran, who's going to be the one taking us through the case study that I mentioned and the key features and benefits. And I'm sure that some good questions are going to be asked along the way. So feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll do our best to kind of answer them in the chat. Or if we can't in the chat, we'll get to them in the QA period. So a little bit about us. Eperformance has kind of 20 plus years of experience specializing in medium to large enterprise grant management solutions based off Microsoft technologies. So we've been using, the CRM technology platform for quite a while. We promote better practices in grants management. So we work with, very many different departments within the Canadian government to kind of align to the Treasury Board model. We're recommended by Microsoft to its clients for grant automated solutions. So we're a Microsoft partner, and we work very closely with them whenever they have granting needs. Our solution is turned to. And we're staffed with certified Microsoft professionals and grant automation specialists. So we've been, like I said, we've been with the technology a really long time. Part of being a Microsoft partner is having certifications with the tool, and the large portion of our staff do have those. So what is Grant Plus? Grant Plus is a cloud-based software application leveraging Dynamics 365 and Microsoft Power Platform to support the automation of grants and contributions management. It provides a full range of functionality for grants management and end-to-end workflows, including everything from the application process to the reviews and approval agreements, administration, and performance tracking. So essentially your full suite throughout the grant process, your full suite of feature sets and process. We have kind of an answer or an option for that within the solution. And it's specifically designed for Canadian government and can further be configured to meet the unique requirements of granting organizations. So, the solution was designed to be very flexible, because we know, things in the granting world need to be. Every department, every kind of granting organization does things a little bit differently. So we like to have the ability to configure those changes rather than customize those changes. And that's a big part of our solution and a big advantage that we have. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Divya, and she's going to kind of take us through the scenario for grants management and Grant Plus that we want to cover today. So over to you, Divya.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Divya Ramachandran. I'm the lead product owner here at Eperformance. And as Michael said, I will be walking you through a case study specifically relevant to the reviews process in funding grants and through the life cycle of a grants management process. So when it comes to reviews, a typical review process usually includes an initial screening of applications. So applicants who submit the forms in request for funding, there is an initial screening process in terms of making sure there's a due diligence aspect to making sure all the data that is needed and absolutely mandatory in terms of eligibility is considered, and only the applicable participants can move forward. Then there is usually or typically an expert review panel. experts who have knowledge in terms of what the funding provides. Maybe it's the area of expertise around the type of funding. For example, research grants. There would be people who have done reviews before, but not only that, like have years of experience in that domain. So those individuals are invited into the expert review panel process, who review each of the applicable submissions, I should say, and provide their scoring or ranking according to the criteria that have been specified in terms of eligibility and in terms of what the scoring category should be. Once that is done, there typically is a second round where it is kind of a selection committee where a group of individuals sit together, review each of the eligible reviewed applications already. So usually the expert review panel kind of condenses the eligibility and the submissions into a smaller group with high scores, and these high scored participants are then brought into the selection committee review and deliberation, after which there is typically a decision made, an award is granted or a funding is granted, and then the process continues in terms of next steps to get the payment for the funding, and then future steps in terms of closing that funding cycle as well. And for today's case study, we are going to be focusing on the review process itself. So, in terms of our case study, we have considered a problem statement that we have experienced in the past with a client. So, example, National Research Association has been funding grants for multiple years. Say, for example, the past 5 years. But in all that time, the review process has been through emails. So they've had reviewers come in and register for the reviews of each of these fundings, but all the review processes have been through emails where the program office has to send them emails in terms of inviting them to the review process, get them to provide their reviews back, share a lot of information related to applications. So it can get quite cumbersome and tedious and time consuming in terms of back and forth, the administration, and just maintaining all that data through emails and managing, for example, maybe in Excel spreadsheets, all the scoring and the calculations that have to happen. So that because of that tedious process, what was realized was, okay, we need an online application, and for this current funding cycle, the National Research Association decided to use Grant Plus to enable the reviews online and automate the review process. So in terms of that, just from a case study perspective, assume that we have public participants who have submitted applications to get funding for example, the 2024 French Studies Bursary Program. So one of the funding programs that is available online. And after initial due diligence has been completed, formal reviews will be conducted to find the eligible applications. So for our case study today, we have a screening analyst, Sophie, who's going to be reviewing and making sure the applications are in a fit state to continue to the review process. Then we have two peer reviews. One is Felix, one is Leila, and I'll kind of talk to you about what that means when we come to the next step. And we have a selection committee lead who would be the person making the final decision and submitting the final award in terms of which applicant is going to get the funding. So first step, Sophie, who's going to be looking at the applications that have come in for the funding programs, what she does is she does an initial application assessment of all the submitted applications. She goes through, assesses, makes sure that the applications have all the important information. If there's amendments, so example, if the application is incomplete, she can send them back to the applicants to get that information updated. Once the applications have been deemed complete, what she can do is make sure that the applicants can go to the next stage. If they are not eligible, she can set them to be not eligible right off the bat, which then can be sent as emails to the applicants with the criteria on what they did not meet. And once the applicants have been identified that can continue to the review process, what Sophie can do is create reviews. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like in Grant Plus system as well. So if I go to, this is the Grant Plus solution on Power Platform. And in this view that you see, it is something that we call as the CRM or the Power Apps view, which is the back office or the program office, screening office, whatever department you can call it. This is the internal organization view where all the information is stored in terms of the funding, in terms of the entire life cycle for the grants management, in addition to like the contacts and the accounts or the organizations that are the participants of the program. In this case, for example, what I'm showing you is a dashboard that is typically available in terms of the program office and screening office, which can be configured to be as part of the records that have to be visible to the screening officer, for example, to make quick decisions. So it kind of provides a quick cursory overview of where things are at on a given day. It can also be set up in terms of a dashboard for each type of participant. So if you have, for example, a screening officer, you also have a financial officer, for example, who looks at payments and things like that. The dashboard can be set up separately for those kinds of participants. From our perspective, Sophie has to identify, for example, who the active reviews are set to, how many reviewers are there in terms of who's available right now from a review perspective, and how many submissions have been are in ready for review state, for example. So if she sees ready for review, she sees, oh, there's a few that are ready for review, and then can continue on to the review process. So what she does is she clicks on the records to identify the active submissions. And as you can see, there's a bunch of active submissions that have been completed. Some are in progress, some have been successful, some are ready for review. So there's a number of different criteria that can be set up. In terms of going to the next step, what Grant Plus has in terms of making sure that these statuses are met is called as the decision engine. And I'm going to show you an example of that uh, in terms of the decisions. So we call this as the decisions. And in this example, in this case, for example, this submission that has come in from the applicant side is ready for review. So what Sophie does is, okay, this applicant has finished all their information, everything, they are eligible for the next step. Because it is ready for review, she starts the reviewer setup process. So what she does is she sets the decision to be a reviewer set up, and she goes to the review tab. In the review tab, she will identify, okay, who are the suggested reviewers. In this case, there's 5 of them. And based on the availability that she can see, she's going to add Leila and Felix as the reviewers for this application. Now, Leila is one of the peer reviewers, which would be the expert panel reviews that I had initially mentioned. And then what she also does is, as a second reviewer, she adds Felix as well. Now, from a reviewer and review standpoint, each application, for example, can have multiple reviewers and multiple reviews assigned to them. So as you can see, each time a reviewer is added, there is a unique ID associated or a unique review associated to that reviewer. So Leila and Felix, for example, can get automatic notifications right now in terms of being invited to review. So here is a sample of an email, for example, that suppose Leila received or Felix receives. As you can see, it is a bilingual email which can be set up with the specific text that, for example, your organization would like to use. And there's also an option to, for example, take an excerpt from the submission itself. So in this case, I've taken an excerpt from Mark Schmidt's submission and put that into the email just from a reviewer credibility functionality perspective, so that the reviewer can assess beforehand whether they want to agree to review, whether they won't be able to review this. It doesn't match the criteria from their perspective in terms of their expertise. So there's a lot of flexibility in setting up the emails as well, and getting to the next stage of the process. So in this case, we have a review panel emails sent in terms of the invitation, where they can go in and log into the portal in terms of next steps to get the review done. So that would be the next step. So in this case, what I've done is I've gone into the portal, and this is what we call as a Grant Plus intake portal. This is where we configure applicants or reviewers or any any other role to come in, log into the portal, which is kind of like the public facing interface. Log in, for example, Leila is logged in right now as the reviewer, and then they have options in terms of next steps in what they want to do. In our case, Leila is a reviewer and hence sees the reviewer profile on her menu options. So in terms of reviewer profile, now reviewer profile is something that in Grant Plus we set up as something that they provide in terms of their own information. So Leila, for example, being a reviewer, has been registered to the organization as a valid expert, but we need more information in terms of Leila's expertise. And in addition to that, we also have something called as the confidentiality and conflict of interest declaration in the reviewer profile. Now, because reviews tend to be something that has to be considered as non-biased, it has to be objective. There has to be certain conditions in most cases where they have to declare a conflict of interest not being applicable in terms of doing a review. So if there is a conflict of interest and they cannot review, they can declare that information in this reviewer profile, in which case the program office knows to say that, okay, for this annual period, there is a conflict of interest. Shouldn't be applying this reviewer to any review. In this case, after reading through the confidentiality statements, Leila has agreed to the fact that there is no conflict of interest and she would like to proceed to do um, the reviews. Now, in order to do the reviews, for example, Leila can go to my reviews, and in my reviews, she will be seeing all the reviews that are assigned to her. So in this case, for example, the one that I just assigned to Leila, Sophie assigned to Leila, has been displayed in the list, which is in draft mode. But there is an additional review in terms of another participant or another applicant who is also part of the review process. So anything assigned to Leila, for example, that she has to review particularly is visible here. So in terms of the next steps, I click edit on Nina's review form. And as you can see, Nina's original information in terms of the submission is displayed. So a little bit of information here is we design Grant Plus in such a way that the applicant information is just basic information so as to make sure that there is privacy considerations are taken into account, where we don't reveal the email information, we don't provide their address or phone number, even though the applicant would have sent that information to the program office. So this kind of adds an additional level of security. And also another aspect to it is if you there is a reviewer acceptance. So there is kind of a second conflict of interest declaration that is happening, because they could have said, okay, I do for this funding, I don't have a conflict of interest. But if they read the applicant information, for example, if they know who the applicant is, or if they are part of the organization that the applicant is relevant to, they could have a conflict of interest. In which case, the second conflict of interest allows them to declare the fact that they can't actually review this because this is not applicable to them. In which case, the reviewer can be assigned to another review. So even if they declare in this second phase that they have a conflict of interest, does not mean that they are deemed as not available for the entire program. It just means that they can't review for this applicant. They could be assigned to a review for another applicant and proceed through that route. In this case, just to go ahead with the review, I will be saying I will be reviewing the application. Once this declaration is made and the record is saved, you will notice that new pages appear. So from a security perspective, this kind of makes sure that you're not giving more information than is needed till the reviewer has accepted that the conflict of interest is not there in terms of the applicant's information. So once the pages are visible to the reviewer, it's taking some time to load, but what can be provided to them is supporting documents that the applicant had set up. So for example, Nina, for her application to the funding, provided all these documents. The reviewer can download that document and open it. This is a sample document, for example, and then they can review all the submission information that is applicable to the review process For example, they are providing their proof of citizenship, they're providing their publication for an essay, they're providing their evidence of enrollment. A lot of that criteria is considered as part of the review process just to make sure that it is objectively verified in terms of the next steps of providing funding. Another thing to note is all of these pages are configurable. So if your organization does a review process in a different format, that can be configured here as well. This is just a sample option to show you what it looks like. Another aspect to reviews is providing a score or providing a ranking in terms of what it means in terms of the application for funding. Should this go ahead? Should there be a recommendation for a scholarship, for example? Should there be funding provided, etc. Another aspect to that is the reviewer evaluation, which is on this page. So this is again configurable. For our demo purposes today, it has been configured to show a review rating based on some evaluation criteria. So in this case, I'm just going to say save. I'm going to say we are recommending that this scholarship or funding be provided. Just add some additional text and save the page. So once this is done, there is a review scoring aspect for this review, for this applicant, for the submission that has been assigned. And then once this is done, the Leila reviewer can submit the form. And once the form is submitted, Sophie will get an indication of the fact that review has been completed. And just assuming that Sophie has logged in, they go to the review and they identify the fact that, okay, Leila has submitted the review. And what will happen is after a few seconds, uh, there will be a scoring provided in terms of the average calculation. So now that Leila has submitted, for example, the scoring has been automatically populated. And for now, this is just an average score. So once Felix also submits the review from his perspective, the score will be calculated and then an average will be taken out. So I'm just going to do a quick review submission from Felix's perspective, just to show you that the review will be updated. So I'm just going to go directly here. I'm going to say, yes, I will be reviewing. And then put the reviewer evaluation with a different scoring, for example, and say yes and submit. And do a submission as well. And as you can see, the submission happens only after all the mandatory information is filled in. So now that I have two reviews, what I'm just going to do is update the decision to say peer review accepted, because the peer review now process is complete, because we only assign two reviewers to the submission. So now it goes to the initial review complete stage, where it will move into the next phase of the under committee review. So if I go to review now, I see that there is an average calculation now because there were two reviews submitted, and it has considered both the reviews in this case to make sure that the average is calculated. Now going back to the slide. So this is the part that I had initially talked to you about, where Leila and Felix updated their conflict of interest, reviewed the applications, accepted the review, and provided their scoring. The next stage is for Sophie to assess all the completed reviews. So she'll go through her list of all the applications that have finished peer review completed, and then she assesses the top scores in terms of getting the high scoring average and sets the reviews to the committee review round. Once that is done, Sophie can set up a committee of members that have been that are going to be assigned the next stage of the review process. So they, for example, they take the top 8 high scored reviews and they set it up for the committee review. So in the system, what Sophie can do is Sophie can assess and see who's set up to be eligible for the next committee review round. So as you can see here, this is something that we call as a view. In a submission, for example, each entity has the possibility to create multiple views in the system. These views are kind of like a great tool to do reporting in terms of finding the exact filtered criteria that you need to report on. So for example, I need to just see eligible for selection, but if I just wanted to see the submitted applications, oh, there isn't anything submitted. But if I wanted to see ready for review applications, you can see that here. You can then again go back into eligible for selection, for example. You can create your own reports. So if you wanted to create your own personal report that you wanted to see on a daily basis, that's something that can also be configured here. So a lot of flexibility in terms of creating reports as well. And as you can see, it allows to export to Excel and other tools like XML, for example, to create additional reports in that can be utilized in other integrated systems, for example. So this is Sophie's view of who's got the highest scores and who's going to be participating in the next phase of the committee review process. Now, in terms of committees, for example, what she can set up is she can identify who's available for a committee review. She can set up a committee, for example, this one that I have set up already, and she can set up who's going to do the committee review. So, for example, Felix and Leila, even though they were part of the peer review process, can also be eligible to be part of the committee review process. So it can be either different participants, it can be the same set of participants, but there is always a committee lead that has been assigned to the review. So, for example, in this case, Mark Rochester is the reviewer who's going to be the committee lead and who's going to make the commit and submit to the decision of the review. So on the portal, when Mark logs in, for example, as the lead, what they can see is they can see their own reviews, but they can also see something called as a consensus or committee review list. And in this case, what Mark sees is Mark has a view capability of Felix's review. They can also see Leila's review, but they can also edit or update the final review. So if you see here, there is a flag that says this is the final review, in which case it indicates that it is a committee review. So again, because it's the portal and it's public facing, a lot of our clients end up having to configure it based on their business requirements, even branding, for example. And these views that we see or the menu options that we see are flexible to be configured in terms of what your needs would be. In this case, we have a review that is a consensus review from a committee perspective that I have set up, and I click edit on that review. Now, the review aspect, or in relation to the fact that the review is a consensus review or a committee review, the review form itself can either be the same as the previous form that we identified for peer review, but the other option is also it can be differentiated to display a different form. So if it's a consensus review or a committee review, for example, the pages of the form can be different. So in this case, I'm going to say I will be reviewing and go ahead and save. Just giving it a few more seconds. And then as you can see, there's different options here in terms of the pages to be displayed, in terms of the review process and the fields displayed. You can also have downloadable documents that can be applied so that if there's a guidance document or a help guide, for example, for the review process, that can additionally be configured. So the review itself will be configured. The review itself, once submitted, will follow the same scoring process. Or if from a consensus or a committee review perspective, you think that the scoring or your business requirements need the scoring to be different, that can also be applied to this. So when Mark logs in, for example, they go through, and typically committee reviews are done either in a meeting in person or online. So Felix, Leila, and Mark would sit together, review all the top 8 candidates, do a deliberation in terms of next steps on who gets the funding. They would review all the associated documents to the application. They would also review the comments of the previous reviews or the peer reviews that were done, discuss the score in terms of the next steps, and then after that, identify for example, the top 3 candidates who can get the grant. in which case the system can send the three candidates congratulatory letters in terms of next steps, in fact, that they have been awarded funding. And on receiving the congratulatory letter, the applicants can log into the portal and sign an agreement in terms of the next steps in getting the grant money or the funding that they had applied for. Non-winners, for example, would can get an email saying that they have not been accepted, and then see if there is another process or there's future funding. Provide that kind of information in the email to the non-winners as well. So now that we've kind of completed the case study, what are the outcomes of having such a case study or outcomes of having a review process online? So this is something that we've derived from one of our clients where they had a very manual review process, but as soon as they went into the online portal review process, their efficiency increased in terms of being 91% in year two versus where they had a baseline of 26% in year one when their target was 80%. So it kind of exceeded much more than what they had set as their target of efficiency. And from Sophie's perspective, for example, who is the program office, she has been surprised to identify that the review and application process took less than the quarter of the time in the past. Like, I know review processes can be cumbersome, but even just having, like, even if with a few late nights, the record basically was set because 91% is way higher than what the target was set to be. So that covers our case study for today, in terms of just identifying and seeing what a typical review process looks like. As I mentioned, there's a number of different elements that can be configured in terms of departmental business rules and business requirements. And then just to kind of cover Grant Plus in general in terms of what it provides. So Grant Plus and the system that I showed you, including the portal or the back office, it has a lot more than just reviews. It has the entire grants management or contributions management lifecycle configured in the system, and it can be applied to any aspect of that, in terms of making it more efficient in terms of your funding programs and in terms of a grants management program. So some of the key business features that Grant Plus provides is, as I mentioned, programs, setting up the funding program. So you can either have fixed programs that are like applicable only for an annual period, for example, or continuous funding programs that apply throughout the year. Applicants can come in, apply for the funding as and when they need. Then there's the option to have multiple funding programs. So it doesn't have to be that you're applying only the public is available, public is seeing only one funding program at a time. If you have multiple funding programs that need to be open at the same time, that is an option that can be set up as well, where the end user has the option to either apply for any of the open programs. Then there's the application intake. So when it comes to applying for funding, you can set up the portal to be having intake forms that have appropriate information per program, and it can be bilingual. So we can set up the portal to be English or French, for example. You have the option to even have another language. So in this case, we have I'm sorry, this is just a sample, but you have the option to set it up as multilingual or bilingual for the public participants. So you can have the intake forms that are set up for the applications. We can have eligibility checks. So for example, if an applicant is not eligible for certain criteria set up for a program, they cannot continue ahead to submit the form, which kind of reduces the program office's due diligence phase as well, because they don't have to look at applicants that are not actually eligible to participate in the funding. Then depending on the program, you can have different pages, sections shown. Similar to how reviews can be different in terms of the forms seen, applications can also be different depending on the funding opportunity or the program. Then we have application assessment and decisions. So similar to how I showed you that the decisions were made to go from ready for review to review accepted, you have the decision module that can be set up, which is highly configurable in terms of what kind of decisions your organization makes. Then there's the process of amendments. So if an application is not complete, for example, instead of the program office having to contact the applicant by email or by phone and saying, hey, what is this information? send me this document, they can just open up the form again, and the applicant has to do the due diligence of submitting the right form with the right information. And a lot of checks can be applied in terms of the mandatory information that's provided, the decisions that need to be made, etc., that can be applied to the application, which can then continue on to the end-to-end process of being agreed to for funding or rejected for funding. Administration and monitoring, similar to the dashboards and progress reports, the reports and views that I talked about, a number of different elements can be configured in the system to get progress reports, performance scorecards, and just to make sure that the objectives of your funding have been met. And then we can also set up payment schedules and other processing steps. Grant Plus comes with a number of different options out of the box in terms of that step, including agreements and setting up the payment schedules and monitoring aspects of the different process from beginning to the end of the funding cycle. Some key features in terms of the system itself. I showed you the web portal, which is where typically applicants or reviewers or any other role that your organization thinks might be beneficial to be public facing can be configured. We have it's a secure access to the portal. There is a by default we set it up with Microsoft Entra ID, which is a highly secure authentication method in terms of logging into the system. And we also typically set up multi-factor authentication for added security. There is an option to set up a user profile, organization profile. If we have to set up other kinds of profiles, that can also be set up. As I mentioned, it can be bilingual or multilingual. In terms of WCAG compliance or accessibility compliance, it is WCAG compliant 2.1 AA, which is the Ontario specified compliance measure, and it operates at a protected B security level. So it provides access based on the need to know data information services perspective. So authentication, as I had mentioned in terms of security, is highly beneficial on the portal so that only the people who are supposed to be looking at the data are looking at the data as well. Then we have something called as a notification center. So similar to how CRA sends us messages where we have to log into the CRA portal and look at the messages that they send, we can do that with Grant Plus as well, where the program office can send personal messages on the portal to the applicant or the reviewer or whoever is logging to the portal. Similar to getting, if, for example, applicants have questions and they are like, I don't know who to contact, I don't know the email of the program office to contact, they can apply and put in service request. Service request is kind of like a service request, request for information option that the applicant can put into the system through the portal, in which case that comes to the program office and then they can reply to the applicant through the notification center or reach them outside of the system. You can upload documents. So similar to how I showed you that the applicant had uploaded their documents for the submission, reviewers can also upload documents. Any user that needs to upload different kinds of information in terms of the type of information. So proof of eligibility, research abstracts, for example, things like that. Different types of documents can be applied, and it also, the system allows for different types like PDFs, Word documents, TXT files, that kind of upload as well as possible. It is also highly mobile compatible. So Microsoft Power Platform in itself is compatible to be used on mobile applications. So the portal, the back office, all of that can be used from a mobile interface as well. And as I mentioned, we have applicants and reviewers configured out of the box, but it can be extended to user for any user role. Program office, we kind of went through a few of these where you can have administrative features set up. So for Grant Plus, you can set up leads and opportunities. If your account managers want to track that information in terms of the next steps in getting leads and opportunities converted to cases, for example, from a funding perspective, that is an option that can be set, that is an option provided in Grant Plus. You can create funding programs, opportunities. You can manage the different aspects of grants and contribution and files. You can also schedule appointments and notify stakeholders either through the notification center on the portal. You can send them emails. You can also configure things like text messages to be sent out of the system. You can have management of the agreements and approvals. So usually a grant or funding has an agreement aspect to it where there are terms and conditions that have to be agreed upon before funding is provided. All of that information, including the versioning of the different aspects of agreements, are maintained in Grant Plus and can be monitored and maintained in terms of documentation as well. As mentioned before, we can have performance and progress monitored. We can have amendments and to applications and agreements so that if there are different versions of agreements that need to be amended, that can also be done through the system. We can have payments and repayments set up through the system and also integrated to external applications. So if you have a finance application, for example, that is external, we can integrate through something called as Power Automate to access and either retrieve information from the external system or send information. A lot of flexibility in terms of doing that as well. Another aspect is auditing and closeout activities. If you want to keep track of all the data that is being actioned in the system, you can switch on audit and have that history maintained. And then once all the information related to a funding is completed, you can start closeout activities in the system. So an end-to-end cycle of the grants management process can be achieved directly in Grant Plus. Then we have the option to set up teams, user security roles in the system itself. So the different hierarchical departmental levels can be set up within the system itself. We talked about document management. Out of the box, Grant Plus stores the documents on SharePoint, but through other integrated tools, integration tools, we can set up the documents to be stored on other like GC Docs, for example, as well. Just a quick overview. So Grant Plus comes as a software as a solution package. So you can have the Grant Plus solution either as a program level or an enterprise level package. And that just means that from a program level, it's ideal for a single grant or a contribution program implementation. It includes what I showed you today, the Power Apps and the portal. And it has different service elements that we provide, including the environment setup, which we can stage for you. There is an upcoming a running Grant Plus configuration support aspect to it. And once you go into production, for example, we can provide help desk support as well to have that ongoing monitoring and ongoing support for any other activities or issues that may arise. The other aspect to that is the enterprise level, where it is ideal for multiple programs implementation. It includes most of the program level implementation, but we also provide additional services like planning and program readiness assessment options, business analysis and story development. So from an software development lifecycle model, the entire package in terms of planning for the implementation and the follow-up aspects in terms of running the program, and also the help desk support that comes after related to that. If you're not interested in software as a solution package, we have also worked with clients where the implementation has been done outside of us hosting it, and it's being hosted by the client itself. And we have options in that aspect as well in terms of how to do that. Just a quick overview of the benefits we kind of already alluded to in the previous slides. So we have Grant Plus, which is one of the basic main advantages. It is rapid implementation. It is highly adaptable and scalable. So if you have Grant Plus installed on your system or in your organization, with a quick setup, it is usable from day one, where you can have your business aspects associated to the Grant Plus management aspect of things. It supports most standard business models. So we've worked on in grants management for a long time. So we have identified and incorporated most of the standard business models in the application itself. Because it is a Microsoft product, Microsoft Power Platform, it is fully integrated with Microsoft 365. So Word documents, Excel, Exchange, Outlook Online, all of these, SharePoint, all of these can be utilized in addition to what Grant Plus provides in the system itself. As I mentioned before, we can do third-party integration using Power Automate. So external applications like SAP systems, financial systems, other document storage systems, any kind of integration can be handled by using Power Automate. It improves the efficiency on grant processing time. So kind of similar to what we showed from a review statistics perspective, it has proven to be efficient in terms of reducing the turnaround or increasing the turnaround time of grants management and processing a grants funding from start to finish. It is highly configurable in setting up reporting. So a lot of different reports like risk, financial, performance reporting can be set up. In addition to the basic reports that are part of Power Apps, you can also set up highly intelligent Power BI reports where data analytics is a higher priority in terms of making sure that you have a broad range of data aspects included. And Grant Plus being such a configurable and flexible environment, it can be adapted to be evolved based on the digital strategies that are implemented in your organization. So if your digital KPIs change or you have different objectives that meet, Grant Plus can adapt to that easily. And as we had mentioned, it is user friendly and accessible. It is the portal especially is set up based on the Government of Canada guidelines. But in addition to that, we can also make it based on your organization's branding, on your organization's accessible tools and definitions. So that concludes our session for today. Does anyone have any questions? And I'm just going to leave this slide open as well so that if anyone has any information they would like to contact us about, please feel free to reach out. Just going to open the floor for questions. All right. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for attending as well today. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to this information provided here. Just going to give it a few more seconds, see if anyone else has questions. All right, I think we are good to go for today. We will be sharing the slide deck out and the recording of the session today, so that if you have any future questions, you can always reach out and ask. Thank you so much for attending today and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
You.